House of the Dragon has made its long-awaited return after being off our screens for almost 2 years, and it's safe to say that HBO reminded us of the darkness that lies within the Game of Thrones universe and how it pushes the boundaries when compared to many other shows that are out there. Blood and Cheese is something that many of the book readers will have known was going to be on the horizon, and it was even announced a while back that it was going to be occurring in the first episode, so it had many of us wondering how the infamous moment was going to happen. Following the scene unfolding, it now looks like it split opinions and caused a bit of division in the fanbase over whether or not the boundaries were pushed far enough and it got across the same sense of panic, fear and brutality that was in the book. Well, I thought I'd compare the both of them and discuss if Blood and Cheese was a success in terms of the execution of the scene. So let's get into it. Here is Did Blood and Cheese Actually Work in House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 1. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The reasoning for dialing back when compared to the book. So within the show, it seemed like there were a few differences compared to what unfolded within the book. The first of the important noteworthy things is the fact that both Blood and Cheese made it into the chamber and they went straight for Helaena, who was on her own. This is in the TV show. Within the book, it said that they actually bound and gagged Alicent as she was in there with her, and also the maid was killed during this meeting too. There was a slight nod to the bedmaid in this episode with the fact that Blood stumbled across her and, to be honest, he most likely would have killed her if he had have gotten his hands on her, but she managed to escape before he could get her. Another major thing is the fact that Maelor isn't in the show. Maelor was Helena's youngest child, and he was almost used as a pawn in the book because Helaena actually picked him to be the child that was killed. She's said to have done this because she believed he'd be too young to know what was going on. However, Cheese was said to have taunted him and told him how his mother wanted him to die, but then switched it up and actually killed Jaehaerys anyway. Something which added a real sinister side to the scene that was unfolding. Let's also remember in the book as well, Jaehaerys is a little bit older than what he is in the show, but that doesn't make too much difference, but I'm just putting it out there. I feel one of the main reasons for dialing this scene back in the TV show is because it just would have simply been too graphic to show on TV. Alicent being tied up, a maid being killed, Helaena having to pick between which child got killed, then taunting the youngest child and then proceeding to take the head of Jaehaerys as Cheese also threatened to be extremely inappropriate to Jaehaera. I firmly believe that there are levels to what needs to be shown on TV, and I think a lot of that would have crossed the line and delved into territory that would have probably made it unwatchable, and it would have lost all impact that it was trying to have when on screen. I think it also risked losing itself in this scene because there would have just been too much going on in such a small amount of time. Even though it was dialed back, there were still many moments within this scene in the episode that were difficult to watch. For example, when Blood put his hands over Jaehaerys' face, and then by not showing us what happened and instead focusing on the audible experience. It was something which was just horrific to imagine. Our minds can often do the worst damage, and by hearing the muffled screams and also the tiny blade cutting through flesh, it was just awful to listen to, and I sat there in shock. My face probably mirrored Helena's. The importance of Fia Sabin's performance. Due to the scene being dialed back, it meant that there were other things that were able to flourish. One thing that I felt shone in a slightly different way was the performance of the character Helaena. Whilst we didn't get a traditional performance of a mother in hysterics, which I feel would have still been extremely appropriate, maybe one that would have bore a similar resemblance to Catelyn Stark during the Red Wedding, we instead got one that had her being frozen with shock, where her eyes almost did all of the talking. She was paralyzed with fear due to the decision that needed to be made on which of her children she needed to select to be killed. I've seen a few people say that no mother would react like that and that the decision wouldn't be made as quickly as that either. But let's remember, this isn't a normal situation that anybody can really relate to. She had to make that decision in that moment, or herself and both of her children would have been killed by Cheese. As well as the eyes that were glassy with tears and also the face that was full of shock, there was something that I really liked that she did. Before she did the point towards Jaehaerys, she went to say no, and only the N came out. Then it was followed immediately by the point. She knew that there was no fighting the both of them, and she just gave up when she knew that it was time. It didn't take much to grind her down, but the fact that she knew that the only way for her and one of her children to survive was by making the decision, it was something that made my stomach drop. Her reaction to Jaehaerys being killed in looking repulsed as one would and then taking Jaehaera to some kind of safety with her being numb to what was going on, I think it's insinuating that her reaction is going to be more long-term and come on a lot slower, rather than in hysterics from the moment that it happened. I also found it interesting that she saved Jaehaera when she probably could have passed her off for Jaehaerys. In the opening scene, she was in the same room as her mother, but Jaehaerys wasn't, so maybe that hinted towards a certain level of closeness that they had. I thought Fia Sabin's performance was solid in this, and whilst it didn't steal the scene, it complemented it well. The contrast in pacing. From the moment that Blood and Cheese entered the tunnels, the pacing was something that was definitely considered. It was extremely slow in building up, from navigating the space to the risk of being spotted by King Aegon, to their confrontation before going upstairs, to then with the final part in Helena's chamber where the pacing then increased rapidly. The way that it took a while to build up slowly really allowed the rapidness and intensity of the final moments to land with impact, because it was something that not many of us expected in the closing 2 minutes of the episode. The contrast in pacing worked in its favour well, and it meant that our emotions and viewing experience flipped immediately when it came to the ending, which also meant that we were in just as much shock as what Helena was. So the show tried to give us an unexpected feeling, the feeling that Helena was going through. Did the scene work, and could it have been better? I know there's been some criticism over the scene and the fact that maybe it didn't hit every mark like it did in the book, but I think the show did a really good job with it. Everybody's talking about the scene. It was brutal, and the sound of the killing that took place was horrific too. If anything, that's probably the most memorable thing about it, because you questioned how somebody could do that so easily. I thought the acting all throughout it was also really strong as well, whether that be the shock that Helena had, the relaxed nature that Blood and Cheese had, but also the comedic side of their partnership in such a tense scene. Like when Blood said that he'd end Cheese at that moment, it showed that this was all transactional. The score under the scene was something that I thought also shone and complemented the scene well. There was music that was building towards a crescendo when Blood was approaching the room that Helena was in, and then when he found Cheese with her, the music just simply stopped. This allowed us to really focus on the conversation that was taking place and the fact that their lives were at stake. But then, when Cheese said that he knew that Helena was telling the truth, the music came back in, and over the slicing of flesh and the killing taking place, there was this really unsettling chord that was being played which was just clashing in sound, and it allowed the horrendous act to be accompanied by a piece of music that was just as uncomfortable to listen to. Sound was obviously a key focus in this scene, and it really did work. I think this scene was a success. Whilst it might not have stayed true to the book 100%, it was an awful scene to watch, and it was an uncomfortable scene to listen to. We needed this for the plot to develop forward and for war to be an inevitability. That was the point of it, so I think it served its purpose well. So, there you have it. Did Blood and Cheese actually work in House of the Dragon? If you want to see more videos on House of the Dragon Season 2, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. What did you think of this scene? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.